Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Dale Powers and joined today by Karl Lowe and Curtis Costanza. We're here to give you a little bit of a preview of our reports coming into the advisory board meeting. Again, the activity continues to grow and we keep pushing envelopes, and that's a great thing. But I think there's a lot that we can learn every year. We as a team here, there's so many things that we help each other with, and this year was no different. But let me go through some things for you from the administrative side of the color guard division. We do continue to grow. We grow regionals and in championships, and it creates a lot of excitement, but it certainly gives us some challenges as well. We had the newest challenge I think that we encountered this year was the modification to our safety rules. And basically what that was, and many of you, if you're competed, you know, is we kind of moved everything from 6 feet down, and it was based on some guidelines we got from OSHA. Like anything else, it presented a few challenges, which we worked through, and will modify things moving forward to stay within those guidelines. What was interesting this year was in an effort to make sure that people were in compliance with those guidelines, we asked people to submit their props for approval. And then we asked people to submit lifts that they might be doing that might bring somebody of that partnership or lift to above the 4 foot mark. So it was something that we wanted to look at. And then, of course, always keeping in mind that we have safety in mind first. We did something a little bit different this year, which was every submission for prop, every submission for a lift, which again, I think I might have said this was over 200. We created a document. That document was a live Google Doc and it moved with us everywhere so that when groups went from show to show, and the contest administrators may change, they could go back and see exactly what was submitted, exactly what was approved. And of course, that helps us eliminate the people that say this was approved, but it was approved for one thing, and then of course it was modified. That was a big challenge for us. There were 1,081 units that competed at regionals with us. That was up 29 units from the year before. We had 16 shows that had maximum number of entries. So we had many that were really close, but we also had 5 shows that had a wait list that we weren't able to get everybody in. So therefore, we did have to turn people away. 27 of our regionals had critiques this year. That's up 10 shows from the year before. Part of that is an effort to get our event partners to have double panels there and to get more exposure in the regions. Curtis will talk to you a little bit about that part of the exposure, but because the event partners were so willing to take on some of that financial responsibility, we were able to have critique and offer it at a lot more events. One of the things I wanted to just bring to your attention is the review process. So this year we had 217 units that were eligible for review. We ended up not reclassifying anybody from the season, but we did have one group that submitted their tape early season to go down. We did have an instance where we had a group that, as a committee, we did not vote to reclassify them, but the next weekend, their circuit reclassified them. They did it by score, and then that group ended up going on and ended up in the middle of open class. So I do think the review process is something that I don't know if we need to continue to tweak it, but I'm not so sure that it's the most effective at this point, and that's an opinion of mine. Championships closed for the first time ever. We had to shut down entries. We had 140 Scholastic A units at one point, and we had over 20 on the wait list. One of the reasons why we had to shut it down. But our biggest challenge at championships became not the rain, but the lightning. We had at some point virtually every one of our events was in a holding pattern where we couldn't let anybody unload or load and we couldn't let anybody leave the buildings. So it wasn't the rain, it wasn't the storage part of it. It was even if we had, lots of tents and lots of space, we couldn't let people do anything in the parking lots. So it created some challenges for us. That's an overview of the things that we've gone through during the course of this year. Many of our problems can be attributed to our growth. And as we look forward, as we have this year, the three of us were already talking about what we can do in the future. So there could be some exciting developments there. But if they're not, we're going to have to just continue to find ways to service as many people as we can. Combined schools is another trigger for many of us, something that we should talk about at this meeting. But we have so many other things that, we need to look at as pressing during the season. Certainly some other things we can talk about when we're there. The working relationship between Karl, Curtis, and I, we support each other. We speak very often. There'll be many times when we're at shows when all three of us will be on Competition Suite Live, looking what's going on, watching flow marching for what's going on in other places. And remember, we're never all together. So there could be 5 or 6 shows going on. And sometimes we're watching those shows while we're sitting live watching another show. Having not really been able to have live meetings in many cases for a long time, we've managed to overcome a lot of obstacles since, the pandemic. And we've really continued to grow, and we're kind of firing on all cylinders. It's not that, I think that there's anything that we can't do better. There's a lot of things that we can, but boy, we're doing a lot of things well. So at this point, I'm going to say, that's it for me. You can certainly reach out to me if there's anything in particular, but you'll have an opportunity to hear from me and talk about some of these things or other things as we get a little bit later. So with that, I will turn it over to Karl if you'd like to talk next.
Sure, I don't mind. Thank you, Dale. That was
You bet.
awesome. That the purpose of any report is to reflect on the past. The purpose of the advisory board meeting is ultimately to project into the future. The purpose of the steering committee and their meeting that happens after the advisory board meeting is to create the actions and ultimately provide a pathway to implementation. So reflect, project, and plan. First part of the reflection is ultimately the report that Dale referred to. And the topics I'm going to have available to discuss, if people choose to take interest in them, are initially the hub. I think the hub is one of the most important things that we did this past year, and it was a way to get information into more hands, and it bridges the info between instructor and judge. How that came about is a topic we'll discuss once we're there. Also, the steering committee made a number of sheet changes. Those sheet changes all have impacts, and some may need adjustments. We also have a 2-year policy where we try to keep things in place before we pull the trigger on either eliminating or elevating. All three of us have some type of issue of policies and practices that affect both instructors and judges in very different ways. Reviews, there is a lens through the instructor eye that I'd like to follow up on Dale's conversation. Critiques, I know that's Curtis's lane primarily, but from the perspective of me outside hearing units before they go in, listening to units as they speak, and then talking to units after they leave, I think there's a perspective there that could be helpful to people's understandings if they're curious. Also, we had WGI Con this past year, and I think that there's something to be said about the judge involvement. It was the first time they met live since before COVID, and I thought that was an extraordinary step. I think we can talk about its effectiveness and what it was beyond simply the presence and the act of being. And then also the steering committee took a huge involvement in guiding some of those sessions, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit if people are interested. We also have, as Dale suggested, we had what was called the Judge Academy. This year we moved that into live trials. So it was more of a testing ground and a proving ground as opposed to a training ground. And I think that also, if people are interested, I think it's time to have another discussion about the state of the art in general. We do that every couple of years. We haven't done it maybe shortly after COVID. We did one as we first came out of COVID. I think it's time to reflect back because I think that we had a different evolutionary path that happened because of our COVID break. And I think that has to be talked about in relationship to some of the things that some of you have found necessary to talk about in our project into the future section, which is the next thing. Now, these items that I'm listing and projecting into the future are things that have come to me through instructors or through conversations with judges or simply my own observations as I go to shows. So one of the things that was brought to my attention very early, and this is specific to championships, is the scores seem low at the top of Independent World. There's several different reasons that this might be. There are also about 5 different solutions to what this could be, some with a short-term result that simply gets the numbers higher, and then others that may have more of a long-term impact with shifting numeric ranges in box thirds or eliminating box thirds, things like that. And hopefully you'll all know what box thirds are before those conversations happen. Another item that came to my attention, judges' disproportionate attention to minor points of a moment, potentially missing the big picture. Also, there's a conversation about design and movement to catching up to equipment in both offerings by the units and awareness by judges. I think this could also be related to our break that we took in COVID and us trying to catch back up to where we used to be, and then also producing things in the future that might have a different relevance as opposed to simply finding better versions of things that we've all already done or seen or know. There's also a conversation needs to happen that layers over from instructors to judges with holding rounds. This is something the steering committee had talked about inside the season through request of the judge admin team, and I think that we need to open up that conversation to everybody understanding what the possibilities might be, and if action is taken, what the impacts of that might be, so that we can get your reaction as member units to find where your tolerances are. The other thing is how judges hold into account all the comparative points if commentary is primarily guided by what is offered by the unit. We are so guided by what the unit's offered in real time that we are not always able to express the vulnerabilities they might have by not covering all of POCs thoroughly. And those are usually issues that are surrounding depth. And in the world class especially, people want to hear those conversations about depth. And so we have to reconcile instructor and unit offerings versus judges awareness. And I think there's a large conversation that has to happen there. Excellence in design and GE and how the lens is different than the IA lens when looking at excellence. I think there's a conversation for what types of excellence or aspects of excellence must be observed upstairs as opposed to downstairs, and start making that list and creating those differentials. Also, I think there's a suggestion that I actually had that we create both or either judge and instructor monitors that may have a class-specific lens, someone that watches out specifically for those A classes, and then the open classes, and then the world classes. I wonder if there's a way to have that same data gathered through regionals and also at championships, either through an instructor monitor or a judge monitor that may be able to help us in these advisory board meetings to speak more specifically to the needs of each of those classes. And then I think for the world classes, we need to initiate a conversation discussing the relevancy and our ability to sustain a box 6 as a standard. I wonder if we've outgrown it, and I will tell you from my perspective, we don't have the tools to sustain its meaning and to maintain our awareness of it. In the last of those projections, I need you to know that at a part of this meeting, there will be steering committee will guide breakout sessions. And in that will throw out topics that you have sent to us and topics that they have come up with, and get your feedback so that they can gather your data and information and carry that into their conversations that they have in July at their steering committee meeting. They will also take select topics and then discuss that with the full room at the advisory board. And hopefully that'll be super productive and give a lot of people insight. And they would also, I just met with them yesterday, they would like to have those suggestions before the meeting so the steering committee can be ready. And so your suggestions from your unit, and I realize that a lot of you guys that are attending are directors, so reach out to your staff. If you have some topics or points that you would like to be brought up for discussion, do me a favor and send those to me, Karl at WGI.org, Karl at WGI.org, and I will make sure they get to the steering committee at their early Thursday meetings before we all meet together on Friday, so they can talk. The last thing I have is that you have something that's very important at every one of these meetings, that's steering committee elections. I believe there will be 3 spots that we elect into the steering committee this year, and I'm just going to ask that you take your vote seriously and understand that these people are your advocates. They represent you in those larger conversations that affect change. Their job is to gather information, understand your opinion and your thoughts, carry that along with their own into these steering committee things so that we can create the hierarchy of issues and then plan of action and implementation that comes out of that meeting based on the projections that you're making at the advisory board meeting.
Curtis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing everyone. And as I'm looking at my notes here, I have noticed that there's a lot of repetition, like Karl mentioned before. We all overlap. So I'm going to go through 5 or 6 bullet points here, and we'll be able to discuss these more in depth when we're together in a few weeks in Vegas. So whether Karl takes the lead or Dale takes the lead or I take the lead, we will have these conversations. One of my first bullet points is the assignment process during the regional season. And hopefully you noticed the deliberate nature in which assignments were made, especially the last month of the season, especially with regard to caption emphasis. I know that that was something that was brought to our attention last year, and I worked diligently with the managers and Dale to make sure that we fulfilled your expectation. Or if we need to continue to go down that path, maybe even looking at open and A classes, although that gets a little bit tricky. And as Dale mentioned, we did have a lot of weather situations, a lot of illness situations, and personal situations that really threw a monkey wrench into some of the assignment processes for the regional season and even at championships. We were the night before some of these prelims, we were scrambling because of weather and because of illness. I don't think it impacted world-class assignments, but it certainly impacted open and A-class assignments. Another bullet point worth discussing is scoring, okay? Scoring that could be more consistent, scoring that maybe scores are too low, especially at championships. And I have found over the years, and especially this year, when I listen to commentary, when I listen to judge evaluation forms that get turned in, the main reason why there are discrepancies in scoring is because of propensities and judges not covering the entire caption, the POCs. And we work hard to provide feedback to instructors, to provide feedback back to the judge. And I will tell you that we're moving more and more towards AI because we have uploaded the manual into AI, and we have the ability to put in commentary files. And although not perfect, the computer can evaluate these commentary files. Now, it's not perfect, and I go through and listen and look at what this computer has said, but certainly it is streamlining our ability to provide feedback to judges. It didn't happen a lot during the regional season. Matter of fact, I don't think it happened at all during the regional season, but after championships, it certainly is a technology that we're experimenting with and that I think has a future in terms of judge training. That does lead us to judge training, and I know Karl talked about all of our written documents are all on the judge and instructor portal for you. That is to provide as much transparency as possible in terms of the information that goes from Karl and the steering committee to me, to the managers, and then ultimately to the judges. And you have access to all that information. So hopefully you've found it beneficial. We can talk about that when we get together in Vegas. Karl also talked about critiques. I want to talk about critiques when we're all there, but the difference between formal critiques and informal critiques. What is the expectation when you come to me if I'm the lead judge somewhere or at championships and you come and you have concerns? What are the expectations? We can talk about what is and what isn't in terms of how I move forward with those concerns. I'm looking forward to open discussion and dialogue. And like Karl, if you have specific judge-related items you would like to discuss, you want to have a conversation about, just shoot me an email. Mine is Curtis@WGI, just like Karl's. So again, looking forward to seeing everyone. And if you have any questions or comments, shoot them to me beforehand, and we'll make sure we include them. Dale?
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm going to thank you both for your time. I want to thank everybody for watching. We know that this is just a snippet of the information that we have, but if this generates some interest on your part about a certain topic, yes, either let us know ahead of time. We will have an opportunity to not only talk about things that have happened. I like the way Karl presented it as we'll reflect back, but we also have a lot of ideas moving forward, and we're interested in hearing yours as well. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you.